I never thought my wedding day would end with me standing in the parking lot of the country club, mascara running down my face, my wedding dress bunched up in my hands as I waited for an Uber. My soon-to-be mother-in-law had just told me I wasn't Caldwell material and suggested I leave before I embarrassed myself further. What she didn't know was that I'd already texted my parents. The same parents she thought were simple factory workers from some flyover state. The same parents she'd insisted weren't invited because the venue was too small. My mom and dad were already en route from the airport in their private jet, the one with our family company's logo emblazoned on the side, the logo of the corporation that had just acquired the failing Caldwell family business that morning. I smiled through my tears, knowing that in about 20 minutes, Diane Caldwell's perfectly orchestrated Connecticut wedding was about to get a Texas-sized reality check. Growing up in Houston as the only daughter of self-made billionaires Jack and Maria Rodriguez wasn't as glamorous as it sounds. My parents built their oil technology company from nothing, working 18-hour days while I spent most of my childhood with our housekeeper, Mrs. Gomez. They never flaunted their wealth. Our house was modest compared to what they could afford, and they drove the same cars for years. "Money doesn't define character, Ellie," my father would say. "How you treat people does." My mother, who grew up in a tiny apartment above her immigrant parents' bodega in East Los Angeles, insisted I work summer jobs and apply for college scholarships like everyone else. "No one respects what comes too easily," she'd remind me. They wanted me grounded, connected to something beyond privilege. I attended Rice University on a partial merit scholarship, where I met James Caldwell during junior year. He was studying finance, handsome in that Kennedy-esque way, with an East Coast prep school polish that fascinated me. Our worlds couldn't have been more different. While my parents built everything from scratch, the Caldwells were old money from Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of family with a wing named after them at Yale and photographs with senators on their mantle. The first time I experienced the Caldwell brand of humiliation was during Thanksgiving of our senior year. James had invited me to Greenwich, and I was nervous but excited. I remember standing in their foyer, taking in the oil paintings and antique furniture that screamed generational wealth. Diane Caldwell, James's mother, looked me up and down before saying, "Oh, you're petite, aren't you? James always dated such statuesque girls before." Later that weekend, at dinner with their extended family, she accidentally introduced me as James's friend from that state school in Texas. When she asked about my parents, I simply said they worked in the energy sector. I'd learned early that revealing my family's wealth often changed how people treated me. James knew the truth, but we'd agreed to keep it private. He squeezed my hand under the table as his mother raised an eyebrow and said, "How industrious." The worst came during my graduation weekend when my parents flew to Houston to meet the Caldwells. My mother had prepared her famous chile rellenos and carne asada for dinner at my apartment. I watched Diane pick at her food, asking if there was anything less ethnic she could eat instead. My father, ever diplomatic, smoothly changed the subject, while my mother smiled tightly. Later, I overheard Diane tell her husband, "I always hoped James would marry someone more like us." Despite all this, James proposed after graduation with his grandmother's ring. He was nothing like his family, kind, unpretentious, and genuinely in love with me, my culture, and my family's values, if not fully aware of their financial status. When we announced our engagement, my parents offered us the most incredible gift. They would pay for our entire wedding, whatever we wanted. What they didn't tell me then was that they were also in talks to acquire Caldwell Financial, which had been hemorrhaging money for years, despite the family's carefully maintained facade of prosperity. James and I decided to have the wedding in Connecticut, as an olive branch to his family. My parents agreed, though my father had a mysterious smile when he said, "Whatever makes you happy, mija." What none of the Caldwells knew was that while they were planning my wedding, my parents were planning a very different kind of family merger. The week of the wedding was a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare. We'd taken over the Madison Beach Hotel, a luxury waterfront venue in Connecticut that my parents had quietly paid for in full. James and I arrived 5 days before the ceremony, with my parents scheduled to fly in the day before. Diane immediately appointed herself wedding commander-in-chief, despite the fact that our professional planner, Melissa, had everything under control. The Rodriguez family might not understand how these things are done in Greenwich, she told the florist within my earshot. The rehearsal dinner was at the Caldwell estate, a sprawling colonial property that had seen better days. If you looked closely, you could spot the deferred maintenance, chipping paint, a sagging porch, worn carpets strategically covered with antique rugs. James's father, Richard, drank too much Macallan and kept mentioning temporary cash flow issues to anyone who would listen. That night, Diane cornered me in their powder room. "I've adjusted the seating chart," she said, reapplying her lipstick. "I've moved your parents to the table by the kitchen. They'll be more comfortable with the catering staff, don't you think?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We're trying to accommodate everyone, but there are certain social considerations." "My parents' flight was delayed," I lied smoothly. "They won't make the rehearsal dinner after all." In reality, they were closing the deal on Caldwell Financial, signing papers that would save the company but transfer controlling interest to Rodriguez Energy Solutions. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect New England summer weather, clear skies, a gentle breeze off Long Island Sound, and the scent of salt water and jasmine in the air. I sat in the bridal suite, surrounded by my college friends who'd flown in from across the country. My maid of honor, Tasha, zipped me into my dress, a sleek Vera Wang that made Diane wince when she saw the price tag months earlier. "Where are your parents?" she asked, sweeping into the room uninvited. "The photographer wants family portraits in 20 minutes. "Their flight lands soon," I said. "They'll be here before the ceremony." Her lips pursed. "Really, Eleanor, this lack of punctuality is what you'd expect from people like us," I finished for her. She flushed. "I simply meant it's inconsiderate to the schedule." As she left, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Deal closed. Wheels up. See you soon, mija." The tension escalated when Diane returned an hour before the ceremony, panic evident beneath her composed facade. "Richard just got a call from their banker," she whispered urgently to James. "Something's happened with the company, some sort of takeover attempt." She glanced at me. "Perhaps we should postpone." "We're not postponing anything," James said firmly. "Whatever's happening with the business can wait a day." The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. At 3:30, with guests already being seated overlooking the sound, Diane pulled me into an empty room, her fingers digging into my arm. "Did you know about this?" she hissed. "Know about what?" I asked innocently. "Your parents, their company, they've somehow manipulated a hostile takeover of Caldwell Financial." Her face was pale with fury. "Did you orchestrate this whole engagement as some sort of business strategy?" I stared at her, genuinely shocked by the accusation. "I love your son. That's the only reason we're here." "Love," she scoffed. "You people always have an angle. Richard says we might lose everything." "Not everything," I replied calmly. "My parents aren't like that. They're fair. They're saving your company, not destroying it." "Saving it?" Her laugh was brittle. "By stealing it? We built that company over generations while your family was, what, picking crops somewhere?" The slur hung in the air between us. In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the accommodations I'd made, all the slights I'd tolerated for James's sake, they suddenly felt like betrayals of myself, of my heritage, of my parents who had worked so hard to give me everything. My father has 2 engineering degrees from MIT. My mother has a PhD in chemical engineering from Stanford. They picked innovation and patents that revolutionized extraction technology. What exactly have you built lately, Diane, besides debt?
Her hand moved so fast I barely saw it coming. The slap echoed in the small room, and I felt my cheek burn. Her diamond tennis bracelet had caught my skin, and I felt a trickle of blood. "Get out," she whispered. "Get out of this wedding. Get out of my son's life. You don't belong here."
You never did. The door opened, and James stood there, his face a mask of shock. Behind him was his father, ashen-faced, clutching papers that I recognized as the acquisition documents. "Mother," James said in a voice I'd never heard before, "what have you done?" "She hit me," I said simply, touching my cheek where blood was beginning to smear my makeup. The room fell silent as James crossed to me, his fingers gently examining the cut. "It was an accident," Diane insisted, but her voice wavered. "We were discussing how her family has apparently engineered some sort of corporate raid on our company." Richard Caldwell held up the acquisition papers. "Is this true, Eleanor? Your family now owns Caldwell Financial?" Before I could answer, the wedding planner knocked frantically. "Everyone's seated. We need to start in 5 minutes." James looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Did you know about this?" "I knew they were considering investing," I admitted. "I didn't know they were taking control until yesterday." "It's not a raid, James. Your company was about to file for bankruptcy. My parents are saving it." "By taking it from us," Diane nearly shouted. "By preventing it from collapsing and taking your family's entire fortune with it," I corrected. "They're keeping the Caldwell name, keeping the legacy, just with better management." Richard sank into a chair. "She's right, Diane. We were weeks away from filing Chapter 11. I just couldn't tell you." "So what now?" James asked, looking between us all. "We just go out there and pretend everything's normal? Have a wedding while our families are in the middle of whatever this is?" I took a deep breath. "I still want to marry you, James. That hasn't changed. But I won't marry into a family where I'm treated like this." I gestured to my cut cheek. "Not anymore." Diane smoothed her designer dress. "Well, that's convenient, isn't it? Your family gets our company, and you get to play the victim?" That's when we heard the commotion outside. The distinct sound of helicopter blades chopping through the air, growing louder by the second. "What on earth?" Richard moved to the window. A sleek black helicopter with the Rodriguez Energy Solutions logo was landing on the beach just beyond the wedding venue. Even from here, I could see my parents emerging, my father in a tailored suit, my mother stunning in a couture gown that probably cost more than Diane's car. "Your parents have a helicopter?" James asked, his voice faint with surprise. "And a jet," I said quietly. "And a lot of other things I never told you about because I wanted you to love me for me." I turned to Diane. "You've spent 2 years treating me like I wasn't good enough for your son or your family. You've insulted my heritage, my parents, and everything I come from. But here's what you never bothered to find out. My family's company is worth $11 billion. We have offices in 27 countries. That ethnic food you couldn't stomach? My mother's recipes are featured in Food and Wine magazine." The color drained from Diane's face as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Outside, guests were turning in their seats, watching my parents make their entrance, surrounded now by hotel staff who clearly recognized them. "I think," I said slowly, "that I should go talk to my parents, and then we all need to decide what happens next." James took my hand. "We do it together. Whatever happens with the companies, whatever our parents have done, that's separate from us." Diane stepped between us. "You can't possibly still want to marry her after this deception." James looked at his mother with new eyes. "The only deception here was letting me believe we still had a successful family business. Eleanor never lied to me about who she was." "But she never told you they were like this," Diane gestured wildly toward the window. Like what, Mother? Successful? She told me her parents worked hard and did well. That was true. He turned to me. I don't care if your family has money or not. I just wish you'd trusted me enough to be completely honest. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it, but every time I've seen someone learn about my family's wealth, they change how they treat me. I wanted to be sure. We walked out together into the hallway, where the wedding planner was having a meltdown and guests were beginning to whisper. Through the open doors, I could see my parents at the entrance to the venue, my mother's eyes scanning the crowd for me. And that's when Diane made her final mistake. She rushed past us towards my parents, her voice carrying across the now silent gathering. How dare you people come here and ruin this day? First you steal our company, and now you— My father's voice, calm, but carrying the authority that had built an empire, cut her off. Mrs. Caldwell, I suggest you lower your voice and remember you're in public. We're here for our daughter's wedding, nothing else. A wedding that's not happening, Diane announced to the shocked guests. Not after what your family has done. My mother stepped forward, her expression perfectly composed. What exactly have we done, Mrs. Caldwell? Saved your husband's company from bankruptcy? Ensured your family name stays intact? Or is your real objection that you've spent 2 years looking down on a family that could buy and sell yours 100 times over? A horrified gasp swept through the assembled guests. The next few minutes were chaos. Guests whispered furiously, smartphone cameras captured everything, and the wedding planner looked like she might faint. James's father had the decency to look ashamed, while Diane stood frozen, her social standing disintegrating before her eyes. I felt a strange calm descend over me as I walked toward my parents, James's hand still firmly in mine. My mother immediately touched my cheek where Diane had cut me. ¿Quién te hizo esto? She asked quietly, her eyes flashing with a protective fury I remembered from childhood. It doesn't matter now, I said, though everyone in the vicinity had figured it out. My father looked at James appraisingly. So, son, quite a situation we have here. What do you propose we do about it? Before James could answer, his cousin Bradley, always the family diplomat, stepped forward. Perhaps we could all take a moment to collect ourselves. The guests are, well, they're getting quite a show. I think they've seen enough, I said. Turning to the assembled crowd, I raised my voice. I'm sorry, everyone. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the wedding is postponed. Please enjoy the reception. The bar is open and the food is excellent. As murmurs rippled through the crowd, I led my parents and James to a private room off the main hall. Richard and Diane followed, along with James's sister Charlotte, who had always been kind to me. Once the door closed behind us, the real conversation began. You deceived us, Diane started, but Richard placed a restraining hand on her arm. No, Diane, we deceived them. We pretended our business was thriving when it's been failing for years. We've been mortgaging properties, liquidating assets, doing everything to maintain appearances. He turned to my parents. I assume that's how you knew to make your move. My father nodded. Financial records don't lie, Richard. Your company has brilliant fundamentals, but terrible management. We saw an opportunity that benefits everyone. Benefits everyone? Diane laughed bitterly. We lose control of a company that's been in our family for generations. You keep 40% ownership, my mother pointed out. You keep your positions on the board. You keep your lifestyle. The alternative was bankruptcy and losing everything. James had been quiet, processing. Finally, he spoke. I think we need to separate 2 issues here. There's the business matter between our parents, and then there's us, Ellie. He turned to me. I still want to marry you. I don't care about the money, yours, or mine, or anyone's. Even after I wasn't completely honest about my background, I asked. He smiled slightly. You told me your parents were successful in energy. That was true. I never asked if they owned the company or how big it was. Maybe I should have. Charlotte stepped forward.
For what it's worth, I think you two are perfect together. And Mother, she turned to Diane, you should be ashamed of how you've treated Ellie. All this time looking down on her family when they're actually more successful than we ever were. Success isn't just about money, Diane sniffed. No, my mother agreed surprisingly. It's about integrity, hard work, and how you treat people. My husband and I came from nothing. We've never forgotten that. A knock at the door interrupted us. It was Tasha, my maid of honor, looking concerned but determined. Sorry to interrupt whatever billionaire drama is happening, but there are 200 people out there wondering what's going on, and the internet is already blowing up with rumors. She held up her phone, showing social media posts from guests with hashtags like wedding takeover and billionaire showdown. Perfect, Diane muttered. Now we're a spectacle. James looked at me. What do you want to do, Ellie? I took a deep breath. I still want to marry you, James, but not like this.
Not with all this anger and resentment poisoning the day. My father cleared his throat. If I may suggest a compromise, the business deal is done. That can't be undone. But perhaps we can all agree to a cooling-off period. You young people decide what you want, without pressure from either family. And the guests? Charlotte asked practically. We tell them the truth, I said. A version of it, anyway. Family business complications have caused us to postpone the ceremony, but the celebration continues. And that's what we did. James and I addressed our guests together, apologizing for the confusion, but inviting everyone to enjoy the party we'd planned. Most stayed, curiosity probably being a major factor. The strangest thing happened during that reception without a wedding. As champagne flowed and the band played, the barriers between the Rodriguez and Caldwell sides began to dissolve. My father's charm won over James's uncles as they discussed sailing. My mother and Charlotte discovered a shared passion for contemporary art. Even Richard Caldwell seemed relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted now that his financial troubles were in the open. Only Diane remained isolated, nursing a martini at a corner table, watching her social world recalibrate around the new reality. Later that night, James and I walked along the beach, shoes in hand, my wedding dress gathering sand at the hem. I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything about my family, I said. I understand why you didn't, he replied. And I'm sorry I didn't know what was happening with my family's company. I should have paid more attention instead of assuming everything was fine. So what now? I asked. Now we start over, he said simply. No secrets, no pretenses. Just us. 3 months later, we did get married, in a small ceremony in my parents' backyard in Houston. Diane didn't attend, but Richard did, along with Charlotte and several Caldwell cousins who'd decided I wasn't the enemy after all. The business merger turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to Caldwell Financial. With my parents' capital and connections, the company expanded into new markets and recovered its former prestige. Richard, freed from the stress of hiding their financial problems, became a valued advisor to my father. As for James and me, we bought a house halfway between Houston and Greenwich, a compromise that symbolized our new beginning. I joined the family business on my own terms, heading up a new green energy division that combined both families' expertise. The unexpected twist in all this, Diane Caldwell eventually came around, not with a grand apology, but with small, hesitant steps toward reconciliation. When our daughter was born a year later, she appeared at the hospital with a silver rattle that had belonged to James as a baby. Family is family, she said stiffly, even when we don't understand each other. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Sometimes the greatest triumphs aren't dramatic confrontations, but the slow, steady work of building bridges where walls once stood. Looking back now, 5 years later, I realize that wedding day disaster was actually the beginning of something authentic. It stripped away pretenses on both sides and forced us all to see each other clearly. James and I built our marriage on truth rather than assumptions. My parents and his found common ground beyond money and status. Even Diane eventually discovered that embracing our family brought more joy than rejecting it. The scars from that day have faded, literally and figuratively. The cut on my cheek healed without a trace, and the pain of that public humiliation has transformed into a story we sometimes tell at family gatherings, now with laughter rather than bitterness. I've learned that family isn't just who you're born to or who you marry. It's the connections you choose to nurture despite difficulties. It's the bridges you build after walls come tumbling down. If you've ever faced rejection from people who were supposed to welcome you, remember this. Stand in your truth. Your worth isn't determined by anyone else's approval. And sometimes, the family you build is stronger than the one you thought you wanted. If you enjoyed my story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life dramas and lessons learned the hard way. Share in the comments if you've ever had in-law troubles of your own. Trust me, you're not alone. Until next time, this is Ellie Rodriguez Caldwell, reminding you that the most powerful response to humiliation is simply becoming the best version of yourself.